What if you were a 7-year-old boy in a small village in the Congo, and the village is raided by men with guns? You're managed to escape with your dad, but your mom and your sister are separated from you, and you're not reunited for years until you're finally reunited in the United States. What about an 8-year-old girl who lies awake every night listening to mom and dad fight and argue, and sometimes you know that those arguments get physical, and all you can do is pray, God, make it stop. Imagine being 5 years old in your first week of kindergarten, and you go to school, and you're told by your teacher that you have to practice being as quiet as possible and as still as possible and hiding just in case somebody with a gun comes into your school shooting. Imagine being 8 and waking up in a hospital bed. You have no idea how you got there, and all you know is you have tubes and wires connected to you, and you're too weak to even get up and walk. These are examples of traumas that are faced by our children who come into this church, our children who we see every day in our community. Trauma is defined as a psychological or emotional event or experience that's deeply distressing. Trauma disrupts the normal development, especially when it happens in a child whose brain is still developing. It disrupts the normal development of their brain. They may not move on to that next level of development as quickly if they've experienced trauma. Trauma affects children in many, many different ways. It can affect them physically. They may complain of feeling sick. They may complain of having a headache. They may complain of a stomach ache because they can't process the emotional things that are going on in their head, and so it manifests itself in some physical way. It affects children emotionally. They may cry, they may get angry, they may even laugh at inappropriate times because their emotions, they can't regulate them. It affects children cognitively. They may struggle to be able to understand a new concept or to concentrate on a school, on curriculum or on whatever's being presented because the trauma disrupts their ability to think and to process things. It can affect them behaviorally. They may act out or they may act in various ways, and we'll talk about those in a minute. And it affects them spiritually. Trauma makes kids question, where was God when this happened? Does God even really exist? Does God even really love me? Trauma disrupts a child's ability to regulate their thoughts, their emotions, their behaviors. It disrupts everything that happens in that child's world. So what can a caregiver look for? What might a caregiver notice? First of all, I talked about children may act outward and they may act inward. So some signs of acting inward. Children may withdraw. They may not want to interact with other children. They may not want to interact with adults. They completely withdraw from others. You may find them in a corner of a room somewhere, curled up in a ball, not wanting to talk, not wanting to engage. Sometimes children freeze, and they get almost what we refer to as a deer in the headlight look. They can't function. You talk to them, and they just can't even communicate with you. Sometimes they get repetitive and they just want to do one thing, and they have a repetitive behavior, or they have something that they want that they say over and over, or a particular song that they want to go back to. And sometimes they want to reenact or retell those traumas through trauma play. And so they will act out whatever it is that happened to them over and over and over again. Children also may act outward. They may become violent, they may bite, they may hit, they may kick, they may cry, they may yell, they may scream. They may run away if you ask them to participate in an activity. And they have no ability to control their own impulses. If they feel the need to do something, then they often can't control their ability to do that. And keep in mind, no two children will respond the same way to trauma. Much of their reaction is based on their perceptions, it's based on their cultural background, it's based on their developmental stage, it's based on their sources of support after that trauma. But these are just some examples of some things we can look for. As caregivers, we need to be aware of things that may be happening in the room around us, things that we may do ourselves that can trigger those trauma responses in children that have experienced trauma. Loud noises, yelling or a stern tone of voice from a caregiver, open or closed posture. An adult standing more like this with their arms crossed in front of you is going to be more likely to trigger a child than an adult who's open and ready to receive that child. Sudden changes in routine, sensing frustration or agitation. Children who have experienced trauma are extremely sensitive to the emotions of people around them, generally. Sudden changes in routine. If you try to move a child from one thing to another too quickly, it's going to disrupt them and they're not going to be able to deal with it often, and that can be a trauma trigger. And transitions of any kind, either transitions from one place to another, from one activity to another, can be triggering even if you do them slowly and carefully. So what can caregivers do? How do we respond? The first way that we respond is by being self-aware. And I gave you guys a handout. I want to talk a little bit about this. You don't have to fill it out or anything like that, but this is the ACEs study. These are the questions that were asked in the ACEs study. The ACEs study was done in 1995 to 97, and the results of this study were astounding. The results of this study showed that 40% of American adults had experienced at least 3 major traumas in their life before the age of 18. 40%. And 70% had experienced at least 1 before the age of 18. And this is very limited. This is just limited to household. This is just limited to things that happen within your family. So can you imagine traumas from natural disasters, traumas from school shootings, traumas from all types of other things that aren't even on this list? How many people we see every day who have experienced some form of trauma. So being aware of things that have happened in our own life can help us be more empathetic to others. Another study that I heard about recently said that 25% of children under 4 years old have experienced a major trauma. 1 in 4 children under 4 years old. Can you imagine? That number is mind-boggling to me. So being aware of our own experiences and our own triggers, that helps us to be empathetic. It helps us to be able to know how to respond to these children when they come from these trauma backgrounds. The second thing is body language. Being aware of your own body language, of your own emotional tone, of how you're standing, sitting, your facial expressions. These things all communicate more than words can, because like I said, children who have experienced trauma are extremely sensitive to those things. They see them, they hear them, they are extremely sensitive to emotional triggers from adults. If you find that you're unable to regulate your own frustration, sometimes the best thing you can do is step away. Step outside of the room, take a minute to center yourself, and then come back in the room so that your own emotional state doesn't affect the children that you're working with, because you don't know what kind of traumas those children are dealing with. And then the other thing is to demonstrate self-regulation of your own. And by demonstrating it, I saw a quote recently that said that our role as caregivers is to invite children into our calm, not to participate in their chaos. And so when we demonstrate our own ability to self-regulate our emotions and our behaviors, then we can help children to co-regulate their emotions and their behaviors, so that the trauma triggers that they might experience are not as profound and not as disruptive, and that they're able to move through them quicker and easier. The second thing that we can do, besides being very self-aware, is to follow the child's lead when they want to communicate about their experience. If a child who's experienced trauma chooses to tell you what has happened to them, that is a privilege, and that is something that you should be very aware that means that they've chosen you as a safe person. And if they've chosen you as a safe person, then you need to be the one who listens, who validates whatever their emotions are that they're going through and tells them that it's okay, and the person who reminds them consistently that they are safe now. The other thing that we can do is we can help children name their feelings. Children do not always have words. Like it was already talked about earlier, children do not always have words to name what they're feeling. And so we can look at what their behavior is and we can say, hey, you seem like you're feeling angry, or you seem like you're sad, and help them to name their feelings so that then they can put words to what's going on inside of them. One of the other things we can do is we can provide a peaceful, clean, and safe environment for them. This can mean helping them to clean up, because a cluttered space is often a space that can be a trauma trigger. So helping them to clean up their mess before they go on to another activity. It may mean helping a child have a space to take a break, that child might need to be taken out of the classroom to a place where they're not around other people, other children, and given an opportunity to maybe even help you with some special project in another space, so that then they can have something different to focus on that can remove them from whatever that trauma trigger was. The other thing is, and I think Brian talked about this too, communicate your expectations of that child very clearly and very simply. Don't expect them to take 10 steps of something that you tell them, okay, we've got to do this and this and this and this and this before we can do that. One step at a time, very clearly and very simple language. And above all, be patient with these children, because patience is the most important thing that you can give them. Remember to invite them into your calm. Don't join their chaos. There are some really good resources, some really good websites about this online. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network has some amazing, amazing webinars online if you're interested in the topic. Also, the Trauma Informed Care Project online is another great resource. And if you have any other questions or anything about this, like I said, this is something that I've been passionate about almost since day one of being a chaplain. So please feel free to ask me, talk to me. I can help point you to other resources. Thank you.